Hello, welcome to BUGG-U video tutorials. Today we'll be covering modeling tips and tricks. These are little tricks that we did not cover in the previous video lab or our basic modeling lab because they're kind of situational but also very useful. Before I start anything, it's very important that you work in projects to keep your files organized, especially when you're working on a whole movie. Just for the point of demonstration, I will go over how to set your project again. So if you go to File, Project, Set, I click BUGG-U and I hit Set. Now if I go to Open, you'll see that under Current Project, BUGG-U is already selected. Great. Now I'll just quickly go over the concept of model organization. The importance of this comes especially in when you have very complex scenes, when you have, for example, a model with a lot of geo or a whole set with a lot of characters and props. So under modeling, I'm going to open the pocket watch model, and this is a model Megan Gritzfeld, a previous UC-BUGG facilitator, created, and is a very complex piece of model. See when it loads up, it will have a lot of different pieces. You notice that all of these are separate pieces of geometry. So in order to keep a file like this organized, it's very important that you use the outliner and see which, if you notice, all of these are properly named under groups so that they're easy to segment and select. So if you notice, especially this part, it's very complex. I named it the interface. If you go in here, you'll notice that all the gears are named gear, all the bolts, for example, are named bolts. The benefits of doing this is whenever you need to find a specific piece, it's very easy to find. If I click on the bee's body, it will go to the bee and go to the mesh named thorax. Also, a useful thing is, this is a bit of an advanced tip, but since I have my bolts named all bolts, I can actually quickly use a mel script and select all my bolts at once. So if you look down here, it says mel, and this is where I can execute mel commands. If I do select bolt star in double quotes, I now have selected all the bolts in the scene. Sorry if that was a little bit advanced. It's just something that I wanted to demonstrate. That's it for model organization. So another useful trick that we didn't teach in class probably is the snap tools. So if you always notice, if I move around my model whenever, it moves in a pretty continuous fashion. If you ever want to make more discrete and more precise movements, this is hard to do with this. So I'm going to quickly teach how to use snap to grid, snap to vertices, snap to curve. There are more snap tools, but these three are the main things that I use. So first off, snap to grid. I think this is the most useful out of the three. I use it most, at least. So if you notice on the top here, there are certain magnet icons. If I hover over this one, it says snap to grids. So this toggles snap to grid on and off. Now if you see when this is pressed, our pivot or gizmos shape has changed from a square to a circle. This means whenever I move, now it will always snap to the grid point. This is useful when you want to make precise exact moves. For example, if my model is way over there and I want to bring it to the origin, I can always snap to grid and bring it to the origin. The next one is snap to vertex. If you look on snap to points rather, again, when I have it toggled on or off, it changes the pivot to a circle. Now this might not seem useful, but later when I cover gizmo tricks, I'll demonstrate where exactly something like this would be used. Quickly, there's snap to curves now. This, as its name suggests, snaps your movement to curves whenever you have a curve. But what I use it most for polygonal modeling is actually when I snap to an edge. So edges are considered curves by Maya. So you can always snap along an edge. So for example, this vertex, if I wanted to move it along this edge, I could move it this much and then move it this much and I eyeball it. But if I want to do a more precise movement and have snap to curves on and middle click along the edge, you see I can move along this edge and only along this edge. And if I ever want to model a shape that follows this edge, this is extremely useful. Next, I want to talk about the pivot. The pivot, if you may know or not, you can actually move it around. And the way you do this is you hold D on your keyboard and you notice the pivot changes when I do this. And you can now move it around. So in 3D space, this is hard to do because your pivot actually goes around everywhere. I don't know exactly which XYZ I'm working in. So one thing that's useful is to do this in orthographic view. If I hold D and hold this red bar, I can move it just along the x-axis. Same goes for Y and Z. Now if I to demonstrate this in combination with the snap to grid, curves, and vertices, if I hold X, this is the exact same thing as toggling X and toggling it off. So when I hold, I can move the pivot around, holding D and X, move the pivot around just along the grid. So this is useful when you ever need your vertex to come back to the origin. Now this works with D and V as well. If I do this, I can actually move the pivot to a certain vertex I want. This is useful in, for example, a situation like this. If I want to, say, move these vertices, if I can select these real quick. If I want to move these vertices while keeping the same ratio of gap around, if I do this, you see it spreads out from the middle of the pivot, and this is not the effect I want. If I wanted to scale it away from the origin so that I keep this cut half, I would move the gizmo way here, and if I now scale it, you notice that this ratio is consistent and I can scale it according to how I want. Now the last thing to cover regarding pivots is the center pivot. So currently I moved my pivot around and it's in a location that I do not want. When I'm done with modeling, usually I want the pivot to be at the center or at the very bottom of the model. So a quick way to bring your pivot back is to go to Modify and click Center Pivot, and you'll notice the pivot now is centered on where the center of the object is. So the last thing I want to teach through this video is sort of something that utilizes all three things we've learned today. We learned about model and scene organization, we learned about snap, and we learned about moving your pivot. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to create a measure tool for distance that will help me measure how exactly big my model is. So if I click the distance tool, you'll notice that I get a crosshair. And just for demonstration of what it does, I will hold X. Again, X is for snap to grid, and it snaps to that grid. Now if I click here again, now it measures exactly 6 grid. If depending on your setting, mine is set to centimeters, this means it's 6 centimeters long. You'll notice that on your outliner, now you have locator 1, locator 2, and distance dimension 1. So this is what the distance tool does. And now I want to measure my model. The way I would do that is go to create, measure tools, distance again. Now I want to actually measure along the vertices instead of the grid this time. So I hold V, which is snap to point or vertex, and click this vertex, the locator is there, and click this vertex, now the locator is there. Now you can tell that this model is 4.63 centimeters each. So now I'm going to name this my P-cube1 height, because this is the height of the P-cube1, and name this P-cube1 height lock 1. These are just conventions I came up with. This depends a lot on your project, on your personal style, and forgot the one there, but so you can really name it whatever you want as long as you can tell what it is. It's intuitive for others to know what it is, and that's the measure tool. Now something a little extra that I want to show is if I scale the P-cube, you'll notice that the distance tool doesn't follow. That's not what I want. I want it to measure the current P-cube tool, the P-cube height. So the way you can do this is if you parent these locators and distance tool to your P-cube, this will always follow whatever transformation is applied to your P-cube. So the way to do that is select all 3 items on your outliner, hold middle click, and you can drag them around, put it under P-cube1. Now P-cube1 has a little plus sign, and it has P-cube1, the distance tools and the locators underneath. So if I scale the P-cube1 now, you'll notice that the distance tool grows with the P-cube, and now I have a consistent measurement of how high this shape is. That is it for modeling tips and tricks. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on another video soon.